Hi everybody, my name is Hilda and today we're going to discuss the topic choreology. What is choreology? This is going to be a summary video on the topic because it's a very large topic and I'm going to go in much more details in other videos to come. So let's look at the word first, choreology. It comes from the ancient Greek words choreos and logia. Choreos meaning the art of dance, logia meaning the study of. So choreology means literally the study of dance, and more specifically we're going to talk about the study of movement in general, because we're not just talking about the study of dance, we're talking about the study of potential everyday movements such as hand gestures as you talk, or someone walking in the street. We can also analyze the movement of this using choreology. Notice that choreology and choreography are two very different things. Choreography, meaning the writing of dance, is a way of working that could come from choreology, from the movement research that you do. You could create choreography, but choreology could be a point of departure going into many different directions. One could be choreography, one could be teaching dance technique, one could be writing about dance in an academic way. One could be analyzing movement just for the sake of movement research, and so on. So it's a point of departure, which I'll talk about more later. I was introduced to choreology by a lady called Rosemary Brandt, who teaches at the Laban Center. So I started studying dance studies at Laban in 2009. I did a diploma course there, which was covering topics such as contemporary dance, ballet, jazz, choreography, anatomy, and one of the subjects also was choreology. I didn't know what it was until I arrived at Laban, but right away my mind was blown. So in the first few sessions we had, I really saw dance in a whole different light, and it hasn't been the same since. I have a background in mathematics and physics, so I have a degree in maths and physics. And when I discovered choreology, for me it was almost like my two favorite things, which is like science and maths, somehow combined. So I have a very analytical mind, so for me choreology was a great way of looking at dance. I want to mention also another teacher, Valerie Preston Dunlop, who I studied with for 3 years at Laban when I returned back to Laban to do a second diploma, and this was a specialist diploma just in choreology. She was one of my teachers, as well as Rosemary Brandt, and as well as a few others. I'm going to mention them in the description of this video, so please do check out their work online. And I definitely recommend studying at Laban as well. They do week-long intensives on choreology if that's something you're interested in. Valerie Preston Dunlop is a direct disciple of Rudolf Laban. Again, if you want to know more about Rudolf Laban, I'm also going to post that in the description because it's a lengthy subject and I don't really want to go into it in this video. But Valerie wrote many books about movement analysis, and she was a huge influence of mine, and so was Rosemary. So that's why I mentioned those two teachers in specific. Valerie came up with a structural model of movement, and I made a little drawing here. I hope you can see it well. I'm gonna just zoom in a little bit. So basically, it looks kind of like a flower. The center of the structural model of movement defines movement as a whole. So, and then you can draw it up into these 5 different elements. So the way that we do it in movement analysis is that we look at one particular element of the movement, for example, say the body, or the space of that movement, so that we really can take the magnifying glass and look into what's actually going on here on that element. So 5 different elements in the structural model of movement. I'm going to go through them. We have the body, we have space, we have dynamics, we have actions, and we have relationships. Each of these points are huge topics on its own, but I'm going to briefly touch on each of these for a moment. So looking at the body basically means that, well, without the body there is no movement. So which parts of the body are you using? The technical abilities, really, it's about training the body to be able to do many different things, such as actions, use of space, dynamics, and so on. So the body is kind of speaks for itself. You can't have movement without the body. Yeah. So then we are going to talk about space. Space refers to anything spatially related. For example, are you moving in the general space, or are you moving within your own kinesphere, which is the space surrounding you? Are you moving in straight pathways, or are you using curved pathways? Are you using different levels, low, mid, high? What is your orientation in space? So all these elements are to do with space. Dynamics is the third element. Dynamics refers to the time in which you move, could refer to the time in which you move, and also the energy of which you do. For example, you could move in a slow, continuous pace, or you could have a series of fast impacts. And when it comes to energy, you could move in a soft manner, or you can move into a strong manner. So it has to do with the energy in the body, and those two could have affinity between them. So for example, if you move in a slow, continuous way, often we use a soft way of moving, as opposed to if you move into a fast impact kind of way, perhaps you're using more a strong energy. So there's an affinity between the timing and the energy, but also there's an affinity between these different elements within the within the structural model of movement. For example, if we look at space and dynamics, there is an affinity between the energy you use in your body. For example, if you're making soft movements, perhaps we are using more curved pathways, as opposed to if you make strong movements, perhaps you're using a straight pathway to get there. So there's an affinity between space and dynamics. It's not always linked, but it's just to notice that there is a relationship between these elements. The fourth element is actions. This refers to the action that you take. For example, are you making a turn? Are you making a jump? Are you closing the body? Are you opening the body? An important element for me was the use of gesture, so an isolation of a body part, because I have a background in belly dance and hip hop, and that's something that we use a lot. Obviously in these styles. While if you were a ballet dancer, you would use a lot of traveling, jumping, turning, and opening of the body. Yeah, so all these elements are also part of the structural model of movement. And then the last one is relationships. Relationships refers to the relationship between different body parts. For example, if my hand is close to my face, there is a relationship between my hand and my face. If I look at my hand, there's a relationship here building too. If I rub my hands together, there's a relationship between the palms of my hands. Yeah, so it's the relationship between different body parts, but it could also refer to the relationship of two people or more people on stage. So if I am looking at a dancer who is doing something on the stage, there's a relationship between myself as the dancer and that dancer. Or if I'm approaching a dancer, if I'm leaning against a dancer. So there is a relationship between those two dancers. So that's referring to the relationships element in the structural model of movement. So just another little glimpse that make sure you take a little copy of this in your notebook as well. Now, what's the point of this? So as I mentioned before, choreology is a point of departure. It could go into choreography or teaching or whatever element you're interested in. For me, what I found really amazing about choreology is that it really helped me define what it is that I do. It was defining my way of moving, my habitual movement pathways, and that gave me a particular tool to break out of my habitual way of moving. I actually went to Laban because I felt frustrated within my own limited movement range as a belly dancer. I loved that dance for a very long time, but I started to feel limited in its movement because it felt very static to me, and I wanted to find a way to break out of that way of moving. So choreology was a huge helpful tool because it helped me identify and analyze the movement that I was doing, and then it helped me to deconstruct the movement into different building blocks, and then it helped me to reconstruct the movement into a new movement pathway, a new way of moving. So for that, it was hugely helpful for me. Anyway, you will notice that when I post more of these videos, in what way it could speak to you, we're gonna go into those 5 different elements of the structural model of movement at some point. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe to my channel, like this video, and make sure you click on notifications as well. I hope you have a great day.